Well, hello and welcome back to Radical Dreamers. We are currently, we're through the atrium and we continued down the corridor and we want to go to the left this time. We're looking to get into the treasure room we got into the treasure room. We got the frozen flame. We are now looking for clues on where the frozen flame is. We continue down the corridor, eventually reaching an old, rather sturdy looking door. Bloody marvelous, another bloody door with a bloody magic barrier on it. Wonder what's inside. My sixth sense tells me it ain't treasure, Kid whispered back to us as she examined the door. I suspect that this is the manor's dungeon, replied Magil, his eyes closed in concentration. I can hear the sound of someone moaning in the darkness on the other side. But there's nothing we can do, and thus it is of little concern to us now. Let us turn back. With no way of getting through the door, we retraced our steps down the corridor. After making our way down the dark corridor, we came to a branch in the path. The path to the right would take us back to the atrium and the fountain. That was the one filled with critters. The corridor also continued directly ahead, but the way was completely enshrouded in darkness, so we're going to continue straight on. We continued down the dark, dank corridor until some stairs leading downward finally came into view. All right, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go down the stairs. Slowly, we crept down the staircase, descending deeper into the shadows as we went. At the bottom, we found ourselves at another intersection. The dim, narrow passageway branched left and right. Okay, so at this point, we want to go ahead and we want to turn left. We continued on down the corridor until it ended at a large door covered in scratches and other odd marks. Above the door was a wooden plate. It bore the legend, "Guard Room," in elaborate calligraphy. Well, reckon this might be where we find the key to the door upstairs. No getting past that bloody magic barrier without it. Kid pressed an ear against the door and listened carefully. Doesn't sound like anyone's in there, she whispered. Well, let's go ahead and head on in. Kid opened the door. The room had seemed completely silent from the outside, and so we thought it would be empty, but inside was a lone goblin. It was sitting in a chair with a book in its hand. A light steam drifted from the teacup on the table in front of it, and with it a delicate aroma. The goblin peered at us curiously over its spectacles. There was something different about this one. I could tell that much at a glance. Heavens, how rare it is to have guests. Heavens! Well spoken for a goblin. I could only feel dread and suspicion at the sight of him nonetheless. Sorry, mate, but we're not your guests. Cough up the key to the dungeon if you want to live. Kid slammed her knife into the table to illustrate her point, but the goblin didn't so much as flinch. Ah, you must be Kid. What a pleasure this is. I've always wanted to meet you. Why, you're even more ravishing than the rumors would. Before the goblin could finish, Kid's knife flew through the air. With a quick flick of his wrist, the goblin caught the blade with the back of his book, a mere inch from his face. I see that your approach is as radical as the name of your merry band would suggest, the goblin said, pulling the knife free and handing it back to Kid. She took it without a word, but her gaze had changed. She was like a cat, cautiously studying its prey. And I was just getting to the good part too. Oh well, I suppose I shall have to give up on ever finishing it now. The goblin casually flung the book over his shoulder and into a nearby bin. Allow me to introduce myself, if I may. I am Grismeld, and I am the guard on watch. No need to stand. Please, to take a seat. You're welcome to tea, of course. The goblin beckoned us to sit down. Did he mean to poison us? If I may. Magil calmly took a seat, ignoring the obvious suspicion in the air. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and sit down. I decided to trust Magil's instincts and took a seat next to him. He had some kind of plan in mind. I was sure of it. Kid didn't look like she'd be pulling up a chair anytime soon. She was standing with her arms crossed, eyeing the goblin suspiciously. The goblin poured 3 cups of tea. Here you are. Without the slightest hint of hesitation, Magil took his teacup and lifted it to his lips. He sipped, then placed the cup back on its saucer. It's heal my ailin' tea. Ha ha ha. Yes, not a blend I'd expect to find here. What a pleasure it is to encounter a fellow connoisseur. Yes, it's a rare blend and one mainly enjoyed by the noble classes. I couldn't believe the conversation I was hearing, but I also couldn't help wondering what this rare tea might taste like. My eyes rested on the cup that had been poured for me. I couldn't shake the fear that it might be poisoned, but I also couldn't ignore how delicious it smelled. Before I knew it, the cup was in my hands. This is great, I blurted out. I'd never had such a delicious brew in my entire life. My aches and pains faded away. Yeah, you get healed here. I glanced over at Kid, who was blowing maniacally at the liquid in her cup. I'd forgotten that she was paranoid about burning her mouth on things. Now that we're comfortable, let's get down to brass tacks, as they say. I do indeed have the key to the dungeon, as you surmised, but you will also be aware that I cannot simply give it away. I glanced over to Kid again. Typical, she wasn't listening to a word Grismeld was saying. She was still huffing and puffing at her tea. It seemed it would be up to me to respond. Okay, so, you have to make him, you have to, like, tell him. So, let's see. I suppose that means you want something in return. Let's go ahead and say that. You'd like to know what I want. I want your heads. Grismeld's eyes glittered behind his spectacles. Or rather, I'm sure that's what my employer would have had me say. I am actually trying to read the words out loud, so if you just wait, that bypasses it for what needed to happen there. But yeah, you just don't want to say anything when it comes up. I think the timed part of this game is actually one of the more annoying features, given the fact that I am trying to read all this out loud to you guys, but that's just what it is. Let's see here. Or rather, I'm sure that's what my employer would have me say, but no, I have no such barbarous aspirations. Furthermore, I doubt I'd be a match for you. Grismeld chuckled as he said this. What I live for is the joy of conversation, which I fear my compatriots are well-equipped to supply. Perhaps you might have one or two rippling yarns to share. Grinning, he added, I'm sure notorious thieves such as yourselves must have more than a few thrilling tales up your sleeves. So he wanted to hear a story that seemed a more than fair price to pay for the key. I closed my eyes and thought, aha, I know just the story. How did it begin? One night, a young girl was walking alone in the forest, and then, let's see here. Let's go for she was out, I think. Tell him how a girl came across a large beetle. That's what we're out hunting for bugs. That's what we're looking for. What was next again? She caught a beetle and painted it gold was just what we're going for. The fragments I remembered seemed about right. I had a rough handle on how the ending would go. I took a breath and began my tale. One night, a young girl was walking alone in the forest. She was out hunting for bugs. She caught a beetle and painted it gold. The next morning, she set off into town to sell her catch. On the way there, she met some travelers and convinced them that the creature she carried was the fabled Beetle of Fortune. She sold it to them for an eye-watering price. Rich at last, the girl and her mother lived happily ever after. Hey, Serge, the girl's name wouldn't happen to be Kid, would it? My blood froze at the quiet threat in the voice behind me. What? I'm just making this up as I go along. Don't tell me you actually did all that stuff. The moment I turned around, I found my neck caught in Kid's hands. How did you find out? How? I couldn't answer her. I couldn't even breathe. I braced myself for a slap across the cheek, but before it came, Grismeld called out to stop her. He whispered a few words in her ear, then handed her a small bag. Her eyes glinted like stars, and she looked very pleased with herself indeed. Kid turned to me and Magil. Right, let's hurry up and kill Lynx so we can have some of this here tea. So Grismeld had won her round with his special blend. She must have really liked the stuff. Then again, it was just like her to have her head turned by next to nothing. Oh, and don't forget this, said Grismeld before she ran off without getting what we came for. The key, as promised. I took it from Grismeld's hand. And with that, we left the room. Or should I say, we were dragged out by a very excited Kid. You can, like, try and just, like, force him into taking the key. And there's a fun, optional, kind of like side thing that you can unlock. All right, so we left the room and took the left turn down the corridor. We followed it for a while before coming to an intersection. The way to the right ended at the staircase going up. The corridor also continued directly ahead, but the way was completely enshrouded in darkness. Okay, let's go ahead and press on. We followed the corridor for a while before coming across a small door. Get a whiff of that. Something smells good, whispered Kid, sniffing at the air. We're gonna go inside. We opened the door. Blimey, this is a small kitchen. Must be for the servants, commented Magil. I scanned our surroundings. A basin for washing dishes, cooking utensils, some food made ready for tomorrow, and a mousetrap. It looked like any other commoner's kitchen. Kid walked over to a large pot filled with food and peered inside. Looks like tomorrow's lunch. Want to try some, Serge? Let's go ahead and say I was feeling hungry. Timidly, I peered into the pot. It looked like stew, and it didn't smell bad at all, almost inviting. I scooped some up with the ladle and brought it to my mouth. Gulp. Let's see here. Either one. I'm gonna say it was delicious. This stuff's delicious. You should grab a bowl, kid, I urged between bites. Kid was looking at me again, staring at me intently. In fact, like she was searching for something. Well, you ain't going green or nothing. Guess it's safe. All right, let's have a try. She licked her lips with anticipation and swiped my spoon right out of my hand. Fancy a taste, Mage? No. Kid grabbed a bowl from nearby and began spooning out more. I did the same. We ate our fill. The stew was still warm, and it felt as though the magic of fresh home cooking was easing my wounds somewhat. Suddenly, a little voice ran out. You there, the young man with the braid. Kid froze. Oi, who you calling a bloke? Kid barked angrily in the direction the voice was coming from. A mouse was looking at us with eyes like saucers from the inside of a mousetrap hanging from the wall in the corner of the room. Oh, I am sorry. You are a young lady, I see. The mouse bowed its head in apology. Please, kind young lady, you must hear me out. The mouse put its paws together and stared pleadingly at Kid. I left the nest to find food for my mother, but as you can see, I managed to get myself caught in a trap. If you leave me here, I'll surely be eaten by goblins. Kid eyed the little creature suspiciously. Eaten by goblins? Wait, that's stew! Putting two and two together, Kid ran for the sink. I beg of you, please, free me from this trap. My mother is sick, and she'll be terribly worried about what has become of me. The mouse was clearly begging for its life, but there was an odd little glint in its eye. Meanwhile, Kid was at the sink. Morphed! I'm never gonna get that taste out of my mouth. I'll be buggered if I'm hanging around here any longer. Kid had returned from the sink, only to stomp off toward the door. She was looking very green around the gills. Kindly young lady, I don't suppose you would free me first? You got yourself into this mess. You can sort it out yourself. Kid all but spat at the ground as she left the room. The mouse's eyes welled up as it looked at me. Young man, please, you're my only hope. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and free the mouse. Gah, fine. Unable to bear it staring at me anymore, with those pleading eyes, I lifted down the cage and opened the door. The mouse bounded happily out from inside. Hehehe. The mouse gave a wicked chuckle. You poor naive fool. Suddenly its body began to balloon massively in size. Oi, Serge, what are you doing in? Kid stopped in horror the moment she opened the door. Bugger me, a griffin. The enormous creature stared balefully down at us. Idiot humans, my mother is not sick, but yours will be when she sees what I've done to you. Good going, Serge, you're a bloody liability, you are. Oof, okay, maybe I made a mistake, but you didn't have to rub it in like that. The griffin gave an almighty cry and leapt right at us. Its razor-sharp talons sliced through the air. You need to dodge the attack. Caught off guard, I tried my best to dodge the attack. But the blow never came as the griffin suddenly lost its balance and came crashing to the ground. I wanted to make sure that I got that in there, because otherwise, quick time event here. Oh bother, I'm too hungry to even fight properly. What on earth? I breathed a sigh of relief, running a hand down my chest. Alright, little mouse. Now it's time for the real show to begin. Kid walked up to the griffin, cracking her knuckles. Gulp. Please, kindly young lady, this is all a misunderstanding, a terrible misunderstanding. Panicking, the creature leapt to its feet. You can't kill me. I have useful information. If you let me go, I promise I'll tell you everything I know. Everything. Yeah? I know how much a promise from the likes of you is worth. Kid took another step toward the griffin, not skipping a beat. Rock, please. Is he a parrot? What the hell? Kid kept on coming. The griffin kept on shrinking away. Enough. Magil called for Kid to stop. Let's hear it. Oh, thank you, kind sir. The griffin was beside itself and with relief. Spoil my fun, why don't you, grumbled Kid, pouting as she turned away. Listen well, O merciful savior. Right thrice, left twice, right twice. Should you find yourself trapped in one of Lynx's swirling snares, remember my words. With that, the griffin returned to its mouse-like form and disappeared into a small hole in the wall. Trapped in Lynx's snares? Ha! As if I'd be thick enough to walk into one of his traps. Let's get out of here. We wasted enough time already. Kid turned on her heel and made for the door. We left the kitchen. Alright, leaving the room behind us, we took a right down the corridor. We followed it for a while before coming to an intersection. Okay, so we have the stairway going up or the other way. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to head left and go back up. The passage soon ended at the foot of some stairs. With Kid taking the lead, we started to climb the narrow staircase. When we reached the top, we found ourselves at the end of a long, straight corridor. We continued on. We followed the corridor, eventually reaching a fork in the path. The path to the left would take us back to the atrium. Going on straight would take us to the old, sturdy door. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna head back towards the cell. We continued down the corridor, eventually reaching an old, rather sturdy-looking door. Right, the key we got from that creepy old goblin should do the trick. Kid slipped the key into the lock. The heavy door groaned slightly as it slowly swung open. Clammy air rose up around our feet, as if crawling blindly through the darkness. This didn't seem like the kind of place anyone in their right mind would visit voluntarily. We pushed the heavy iron door the rest of the way open and stepped into the darkness. There was a row of cells, all locked behind iron bars. 1, 2... Oh, Gulliver, Melgid, Zoranda, please forgive me, please. Please forgive me. We heard a voice from the third cell, whimpering and crying pathetically. I strained my eyes to look inside. Faintly in the darkness, I could see something that looked like a man sitting on the floor, so this was the source of the voice. Oi, you alright, mate? Kid called out to the figure. Forgive me, it is all my fault. It's my fault. The dragoons never deserved this. General, Lady Riddel, oh, forgive me, I beg of you. The old man didn't seem to respond to us at all. He only sat facing the wall, begging forgiveness for who knew what. Hello, can you hear me? Asked Kid, trying again. There will be no getting through to him. His real self will have long since retreated inside the shell he has created, said Magil, cutting her off. Shell? What do you mean? I asked. He has built a shell around the core of his psyche in order to shield himself from the truth. He is running from something terrible. He has seen something or been through something or has done something. And so he's created his own world on the inside as a final refuge, the outside world lost to him forevermore. I looked at Magil in surprise. I had detected a hint of unspoken sadness in his words, and for some reason, he was looking at Kid. Watching over her, she stared at the man in the cell. Seeming to notice my gaze, Magil turned back to face me, assuming his usual emotionless expression once more. We live in a world of sorrow and foolishness. It's only inevitable that some would try to escape it. But despite his hard words, his eyes retained a certain softness, his steely gaze giving way to a gentle light. Do you understand? You want to say, I think so. I gave a slightly evasive answer. You seem confused. I don't blame you. You'll come to understand eventually. Magil looked at me and Kid. What was all that about, I wondered. We're not going to get much out of him. He's miles away. Let's just leave him be and try someplace else. Kid made for the door of the dungeon. Wait, called Magil. We must find some way to get this man to speak. What for? I mean, he's speaking already, just none of it makes sense. What are you after? Some things he said piqued my curiosity. He mentioned the dragoons, and Riddel, too. So, you said the dragoons are ancient history, snapped Kid. Besides, how can we trust anything he says? He's clearly gone off his rocker. She had a point. The old man had long since cut his ties to the real world. What did Magil expect him to say? Without missing a beat, Magil replied, we simply have to bring him back to reality. And how are we going to do that? You want me to go to do a little dance for him or something? See if that gets his motor going? In this case, I don't think it really matters what you say here, but I'm just gonna, I knew if I said anything, I get nothing but the earful of a lifetime in return, so I clamped my hands over my mouth to save myself. What are you playing at, Serge? Kid seemed unimpressed. Phew, that was a close one. I don't think that would work, said Magil dryly. Kid's fist drew straight towards his face. But Magil shifted his weight effortlessly, avoiding the attack, and continued. We must break through the shell he has created and drag him back to the real world. And in order to do that, we will need some kind of key, something that will reach him even through the barrier he has erected. Yeah, and where are we going to find this key? Asked Kid suspiciously. I don't know, came Magil's simple reply. But there is someone in this manor who can tell us. You don't mean you're not talking about Riddel, are you? I am, Magil replied with a nod. Alright, fine. Don't know what the heck you expect her to tell us, though. Kid turned on her heel and made for the door. We left the gibbering old man in the dungeon, alone with his sorrow. I followed Kid and Magil back out onto the corridor. Suddenly, Kid stopped in her tracks. Something's there. I quickly looked around to see what it was. There was nothing behind us or in front of us. Where could it be? And then, just as I was trying to figure it out, the wall began moving. A rectangular section opened and swung around, revealing 2 enormous goblins clinging to the back. It was like something out of one of those stories about assassins sneaking about in old castles. Okay. You goblins, screamed Kid. They definitely look like goblins to me. Maybe a touch on the large side. There were 4 in total. All right, so 2 in front of us and 2 that had appeared behind us. Magil rushed towards the goblins behind us while Kid leapt at the ones in front, holding her knife in both hands. I drew my knife and rushed to Kid's side. Crash! The spiked ball of a goblin's morningstar smashed to the ground, crushing the stone flooring. Kid nimbly leaped into the air, evading the attack and landing on the goblin's exposed hand. She swung upward toward the goblin's head, plunging her knife into its left eye. Then she flipped backwards and stood ready for the next attack. That was Kid style. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. The next goblin charged in, swinging its morningstar. Let's just jump back. I jumped back to keep my distance. For a moment, I thought about copying Kid's trick, but I didn't have the confidence to pull it off. I was better off keeping my eye on the enemy and doing things my own way, though I did wish I could fight like her. The goblin pulled the iron ball out of the floor and came swinging at me, swinging it overhead. Let's go ahead and let's do the second one where we're going to dodge the attack. I deflected the goblin's driving strike up toward the ceiling and aimed an almighty blow at its face with my foot. My momentum unbroken, I turned full circle in the air and landed perfectly back on my feet, immediately moving in to thrust my dagger deep into its chest. Shunk! The blade sunk in up to the hilt. What the hell? I leapt backward. Sensing danger, I jumped back. The goblin's hand grabbed uselessly at the air where I'd been standing. Had I been a moment later, it would have caught me. I was dealing with a monstrously persistent foe. But having spent the last of its strength, the goblin lost its balance and collapsed to the floor where it succumbed to its wounds. I realized that everything was quiet and the fighting had ended. That must have been the last goblin. Good job! No damage taken that time. I was doing great. I felt like nothing could stop me. Maybe you ain't such a drongo after all. Alright, thanks, Kid. Moving on. After making our way down the dark corridor, we came to a branch in the path. So now we want to head back to the atrium. And once we go through the atrium, or to the atrium, we want to go ahead and continue on towards Riddel's room. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to, I believe we need to continue on the path. Okay, so we have an ornate door on the right-hand side. That's Riddel's room, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to be going inside. We found ourselves in a tidy, welcoming room, but this time we should actually have a person here. Now, we've read all this before. As someone there came the voice of a young woman. We shrank into the shadows. The woman appeared from deeper within the room. She was lightly made up and had a gentle, unthreatening air about her. It was Lynx's daughter. Strange, I'm sure I heard someone. I was at a loss at what to do for a moment, but before I'd had time to do much more than hold my breath, Kid had already darted over and thrust her knife out, stopping the blade only a hair's breadth from the woman's neck. Where is the frozen flame? Answer me. Her voice came out in a harsh growl. I rushed in to hold Kid back before she hurt the poor woman. Kid, do we really have to do it this way? Shut your trap, Serge. Riddel couldn't help but giggle as she watched us bickering. What are you laughing at? Kid shot Riddel a harsh look. It's just, you don't seem like thieves at all. You want me to cut you, girl? I'd be surprised if that knife could cut anything. For a moment, I felt fate, imagining Riddel on the floor, covered in blood. But then, clang, Kid had thrown her knife to the floor, and I saw that it was only a letter opener. Didn't think you noticed. Whatever, I'm not here to mess around killing the likes of you anyway. I have no desire for bloodshed either, said Riddel in a voice that was almost a whisper. I am not your enemy. In fact, I want to help you. There wasn't a hint of hesitation or deception in her voice. Let me guess, you're trapped in the manor too? Riddel only lowered her eyes sadly in response to Kid's question. The frozen flame should have never been allowed to fall into Lynx's hands. Riddel spoke quietly, but deep emotion clearly underpinned her words. The flame was once the property of an ancient kingdom to the north who kept it for generations. It was said to have the uncanny power to guide people and change history itself. After the kingdom fell, the flame changed hands countless times until it eventually came into my father's possession. That was before I was born. Sometime later, Lynx became aware of the flame's true value and approached my father under false pretenses of friendship. Not a soul suspected what his true intentions were. And then on that horrible day, he destroyed everything. He killed everything. Riddel shook her head, then buried her face in her hands. I don't care about the frozen flame. I don't care about that stupid accursed stone. It means nothing to me. I just want to take it away from Lynx and smash it to pieces right in front of him. And only then we can make that happen. Riddel looked up with surprise as Magil spoke. No one else in the world can seize that jewel from Lynx. Riddel stared, speechlessly. And then in a low voice, she whispered, "What can I do to help you?" "There's a survivor of the Acacia Dragoons in the dungeon who we want to help. And if we're to help him, we need your help," said Magil, taking a step forward. "What? That man is a traitor. It's because of him that Zoranda. Please, it's the only way." Riddel turned her back to us and hung her head low. The Chamber of Death, there might be something to bring him back to his senses there. After all, it was there that he chose to abandon his pride and his life. I assume the Chamber of Death must be the cell with the trapped ceiling. Riddel nodded. "Yeah, that's gonna be a problem," started Kid. "That thing damn near killed us last time." "You will need to take the Einlanzer with you. It is a sacred sword said to have been forged by an ancient sage and a sister blade to the crimson-cursed Masamune. The countless blessings of the Einlanzer will surely keep you safe from the Chamber of Death's wickedness. It used to be such a sight to see it in the hands of Zoranda. It danced like the wind, shone like the stars, and struck like lightning." Lost again in the memories of fonder times, Riddel once more bowed her head. "Forgive me, I have little more to tell you." "You've told us more than enough. We'll take our leave now," said Magil, turning and making for the door. "I wish I had the strength to change things like you do," whispered Riddel, biting her lip. Kid hesitated for a moment, seemingly deep in thought. "It ain't about strength. It's about having a purpose, something to fight for. I will be praying for you." Kid shot Riddel a look over her shoulder. "Great, maybe you can cross your fingers too." We left the room. Well, Kid stopped in her tracks, her senses clearly tingling. Magil and I were right behind her and immediately realized that something was very wrong. We could hear a faint whispering as if a spell were being cast. This one again? Yeah, we fought this one before. A demon! Yeah, this guy again. I do not remember. Let's see here. Let's get the hell out of here. I began to beat a tactical retreat. Kid, however, took a few steps towards the demon. "I can deal with this pipsqueak on me own," she yelled. Then she let loose a roar and leapt in close. "Can't hit me with that scythe of yours when I'm right up in your face, can ya?" The demon struggled to move its scythe far enough back to swing it. But just as she darted in to strike the killing blow with her knife, the creature's tail whipped toward her from behind. It wrapped around her left ankle, seizing it in a vice-like grip. And before she could do as much as yelp, she was dangling upside down in the air. "Kid!" But I couldn't get to her. The demon held me at bay with its scythe. Not one to hang around helplessly, Kid swung herself like a pendulum and started slashing furiously at the demon's wings. "How do you like that, you rat bag?" The demon's tail convulsed in response to the pain, allowing Kid to break free and drop gracefully to the ground. But within seconds of her escape, it launched an assault with its tongue instead. The slick appendage gave off a gruesome glint as it darted out and wrapped around her neck. "Gross!" she cried before gasping and hacking loudly. Even as it choked her, she gamely continued to try and insult it, and then it turned to me and hurled another powerful curse. I heard rustling and scratching sounds further down the corridor. Something was racing toward me. The stench of vermin hit me like a wall. There was a stampede of black rats, brown rats, mice, hamsters, guinea pigs, even squirrels. What the? A plague of rodents? I stopped dead, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The swarm of creatures stopped and stared at me for a moment with their black, beady eyes. Then they bared their yellow teeth and fell upon me, nibbling away at my boots with the cacophonous chittering. "Ugh, stop!" I desperately shook my feet to try and keep them away, only for them to scurry up my legs and all over my body. The squirrel stopped on my shoulder where it proceeded to pull out my hair and stuff it into its cheeks. Ow, that hurts! The rats and mice were gnawing at my clothes. Meanwhile, the hamsters sat at my feet, stuffing the scraps of clothing that fell into the ground into their mouths. The gnawing continued. It wouldn't be long before they started chewing on me. I started grabbing them and trying to throw them clear one by one, but I just couldn't keep up. "Damn it, leave me alone." Just then I was distracted from my own troubles by a rasping whisper. Kid, breathe. Kid was struggling weakly as the demon's tongue tightened around her throat. I had to forget about the rodents and help her. I staggered towards her, mice, rats, and squirrels dangling off me. My knife held high, I leapt towards the demon, severing its tongue and freeing Kid. Where the hell's Magil in all this? The creature stared at me, wide-eyed with disbelief as it died, choking on the bloody remains of its tongue. The rodents disappeared and my tattered clothes and gnawed-on boots returned to normal as if nothing had happened. I pulled out a handkerchief and wiped the saliva from Kid's neck. She shook with horror and disgust. Ugh, I can still feel it. Aside from the potential for an odd nightmare in the future, it seemed like Kid had escaped pretty much unscathed as well. Good job, team. Yeah, I'm far more worried about making sure that I don't take damage here. Okay, so at this point we want to take the left path towards the atrium, and we want to take these stairs up because if you remember correctly, when we were in the clockwork room, there was a sword. So let's just go ahead. We've already read all this before, so I'm just gonna go ahead and bypass all of this, and we're going to go up the stairs, and then we're going to go towards the terrace. We're gonna keep following the corridor, and then we're going to go into the ancient looking door. Yes, this is the clock tower, so let's go ahead and open the door. In we go. Kid stilled her breath and reached for the handle. The door wasn't locked, it swung slowly open. The room was completely silent and there was no sign of life. There it is, our ticket to not getting turned into mincemeat. The ancient sword was right where Kid had left it after pulling it from the pile of junk. She ran over to where it lay. Looking down at the sword, Magil muttered, 2 ancient blades, the sacred Einlanzer and the cursed Masamune. What are you going on about, Mage? You know something about this Master Mune? Ha! Magil said nothing. Well, it seems to mean something to you. It does. Uh-huh. Something to do with old friends I don't know about? Not exactly. An enemy then? Not exactly. You're being weird, Mage. Well, whatever. Oi, numbnuts, grab this thing for me, will ya? I was still standing by the doorway when Kid called over to me. Who, me? Yeah, you. Or were you gonna make me lug the bloody thing around the place? I'm just a scrawny little girl, ain't I? You call yourself a gentleman? Let's see. I don't know if it really matters what you say here. I'm just going to take it. I knew there wasn't anything I could say to her. Silently, I walked over to Kid and picked up the sword like I was told. Whoa, I nearly fell over. That thing was heavy. Good boy. Right off to the chamber of death. Eyes on the prize, lads. Dragging the sword behind me, I followed Kid out of the room. If you don't swallow your pride there, you'll take some health points. So just a heads up. We want to go ahead and go right down the corridor here, and then we want to continue and take the stairs. Let's go ahead and just continue on here. Now, if you remember, this is the terrible, terrible stairway that leads up to the terrible, terrible door. And we're gonna head inside here next time. I will see you guys when we go back into the torture chamber. The chamber of death. It sounds terrible.